In the ancient annals of Middle-earth, long before the rise of men and the forging of the rings of power, there existed a time of great darkness and mystery. The world was young, its lands vast and untamed, and beneath the gaze of the cold, distant stars. It was in this twilight of the world that the Elves, the firstborn of Iluvatar, awoke. Far to the east, beyond the vast forests and towering mountains, where mists of legend coil around forgotten shores, lay the dark waters of Cuiviénen, the water of awakening. Here, beside the shores of the lake, the elves opened their eyes to the world. They were the first sentient beings to walk the earth, born fully formed with eyes that beheld the wonders of the world and minds that were filled with curiosity and awe. The Quendi, those who speak with voices, named themselves after the gift of speech, for they were the first to use language and to give names to all that they saw. In those early days, the elves were few in number, and they lived together in harmony by the shores of Cuiviénen. There they marvelled at the beauty of the stars, which they called Elentari, and they sang songs to Arda, the Lady of the Heavens, whose light had guided them into being. The world was vast and unexplored, and the elves began to wander, venturing farther and farther from the safety of their home, drawn by the wonders of the untamed land. But the world was not empty of danger. Long before the elves awoke, Melkor, the mightiest and most malevolent of the Ainur, had descended into Arda, bringing with him a shadow that sought to mar all that was good. He had created dark places, where the light of the stars seemed dim and cold, and he had filled these places with creatures of his own making, things twisted and corrupted, driven by hatred and malice. From his fortress of Utumno, hidden in the far north, Melkor watched and waited, biding his time. When he learned of the awakening of the elves, Melkor's heart was filled with envy and rage. These beings, so fair and noble, were beloved of Iluvatar, and this Melkor could not bear. He feared them, for they were a new power in the world, and he hated them, for they were a light that challenged his dominion of darkness. Thus he sent forth his servants, dark and twisted creatures slunk through the forests and shadows, to spy upon the Quendi and bring back news of their doings. The elves, in their innocence, knew nothing of this evil. They continued to explore the world, singing and laughing under the starlight. But as they ventured farther from Cuiviénen, some of their number began to disappear. At first it was only one or two, vanishing without a trace and leaving behind no sign of struggle. The others searched for them, calling out into the night, but there was never any answer. Fear began to grow among the Quendi, a nameless dread that crept into the hearts as they realized that something terrible was stalking them in the dark. It was in this time of growing fear that the Valar, the powers of the world, became aware of the plight of the elves. Long had they dwelt in Aman, the blessed realm across the sea, where they had withdrawn to avoid the strife and corruption sown by Melkor. But when they learned that the Firstborn had awoken, they knew they could not abandon them to their shadow. Arome, the huntsman of the Valar, was the first to find the elves. He rode through the forests of Middle-earth on his great steed Nehar, and the sound of his horn, Valaroma, echoed like a thunder across the hills. When the elves heard this sound, many were struck with fear, for they believed it to be the voice of the shadow that hunted them. But Arome was not a creature of darkness. He was a being of light and strength, and when he saw the elves, he was filled with love for them. Tolkien writes, "The Quendi trembled before him, seeing that he was a great warrior, for they had as yet seen nothing of the Valar, and knew not the meaning of such might and majesty." Arome spoke to the elves, and though they did not yet understand his words, they felt his power and his kindness. Afterwards, he returned swiftly to Aman to inform the Valar of the discovery of the Firstborn. The Valar were troubled by the news of Melkor's shadow over Middle-earth, and they resolved to protect the Elves from the Dark Lord's malice. This began the War of Powers, a mighty conflict in which the Valar descended upon Middle-earth to do battle with Melkor and his hosts. The war was a cataclysmic struggle, shaking the very foundations of the world. The Valar, in their warmth, unleashed their might upon Melkor's fortress of Utumno, tearing down its walls and breaking its gates. The earth trembled, and the seas roared as the forces of light clashed with the darkness. After a long and terrible battle, Melkor was finally overthrown. He was bound in chains by Tulkas, the warrior of the Valar, and cast into the void, where he would remain imprisoned for many ages. With Melkor's defeat, the Elves were free from this immediate threat, but the world was forever changed by the conflict. The lands were scarred by the violence of war, and many places were left desolate and barren. The Valar, wishing to shield the Elves from further harm, invited them to Aman, where they could dwell in peace and safety, far from the shadows of Middle-earth. Orome returned to the Elves and extended the invitation of the Valar. He guided them on the great journey, a long and perilous migration from Cuiviénen to the western shores of Middle-earth. The great journey was fraught with many challenges, for the Elves had to cross vast plains, climb towering mountains, and navigate treacherous rivers. Many were the trials they faced, and not all of the Elves were willing to make the journey. It was in this time when three great leaders arose among the Elves to guide them: Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. Under the leadership, the Elves were divided into three great hosts: the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. The Vanyar, led by Ingwe, were the first to set out, driven by a deep longing for the light of Aman. The Noldor, led by Finwë, followed closely behind, eager to learn from the wisdom of the Valar, whereas the Teleri, led by Elwë, were the last to depart, for they were the most reluctant to leave the beauty of Middle-earth. As they journeyed westward, the Elves encountered many wonders and dangers. They passed through the great forests of Middle-earth, where the trees whispered ancient secrets and the rivers sang of forgotten times. There was also the passage of the towering misty mountains, where winds howled like wolves, and the peaks were crowned with eternal snow. Yet not all of the Elves completed the journey. Some of the Teleri, captivated by the beauty of the lands as they passed through, chose to remain behind. These Elves settled in Middle-earth, becoming the Sindar, or the Grey Elves, who dwelt in the forests and by the shores of the Great Sea. Others lingered along the way, enchanted by the stars in the forests, and soon became known as the Lequendi, the Green Elves of Assyriand. Those who completed the journey at last arrived at the shores of the Great Sea, where they beheld the great island of Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle set as a bridge between Middle-earth and Aman. Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, came to them and bore them across the sea on a great island, bringing them safely to the shores of the Blessed Realm. In Aman, the Elves beheld wonders beyond their wildest imaginings. The two trees, Telperion and Laurelin, stood at the heart of Valinor, their light bathing the land in a golden and silver radiance that was purer and more beautiful than any light in Middle-earth. The Elves were welcomed by the Valar, and they dwelt in peace and happiness in the Undying Lands, where they learned great wisdom and crafted works of unparalleled beauty. The Vanyar, led by Ingwe, became the High Elves of Aman, dwelling closest to the Valar and basking in the light of the two trees. The Noldor, led by Finwë, became master craftsmen and lore masters, delving deep into the mysteries of the world and creating many wondrous things. The Teleri, led by Elwë and his brother Olwë, were drawn to the shores of Aman, where they became the Sea Elves, dwelling by the sea and building ships of white wood to sail the waters of the Blessed Realm. Among the Noldor, none was more gifted or more proud than Feanor, the eldest son of Fenway. Feanor was a being of fiery spirit and unmatched skill, and from his hands came the greatest work of the Elves. Most renowned among these were the Silmarils, 3 jewels that captured the light of the 2 trees within their crystalline hearts. The Silmaril shone with a light that was pure and radiant, a light that was a reflection of the very soul of Arda. However, in time the creation of the Silmarils brought great sorrow to the Elves, for the light they held was coveted by many. Melkor, now named Morgoth, the black foe of the world, escaped from his imprisonment and returned to Middle-earth, his heart burning with hatred and envy. He sought to possess the Silmarils for himself, believing that they would give him dominion over all of Arda. His lies and deceptions sowed discord among the Noldor, leading to the first kinslaying and the exile of the Noldor from Aman. Feanor, driven by his pride and wrath, swore a terrible oath to reclaim the Silmarils at any cost, and he led his people back to Middle-earth, where they waged war against Morgoth. This was the beginning of the long and bitter conflict known as the Wars of Beleriand, in which the elves, men and dwarves fought against the dark powers of Morgoth. The return of the Noldor to Middle-earth marked a new chapter in the history of the elves. They established great kingdoms in the lands of Beleriand, building mighty cities such as Gondolin, Nargothrond, and Doriath. The elves of Middle-earth, who had long dwelt in the twilight of the forests, now came into contact with their kin from Aman, and together they fought against the darkness that threatened to consume the world. Thankfully, the elves were not without allies in this struggle. The dwarfs of the Blue Mountains, skilled in mining and crafting, became their staunch allies, forging weapons and armor for the battles to come. The Edain, the race of men who had awoken in the east and journeyed westward, also joined the elves in their war against Morgoth. Together they formed great alliances, and many were the deeds of heroism and valor that were sung in the ages to come. Yet, despite their valor, the elves suffered greatly in the wars against Morgoth. The shadow of the Dark Lord lay heavy upon the land, and many of the fair elven kingdoms were destroyed. The most tragic of these being was the fall of Gondolin, the hidden city, betrayed from within and sacked by Morgoth's armies. The flames of war consumed the beauty of Beleriand, and many of the Firstborn fell in battle, their blood mingling with the earth they had fought to defend. Despite the tragedies that befell them, the elves left a permanent mark upon the history of Middle-earth. They were the first to awaken, the first to sing the songs of the world, and their wisdom and beauty shaped the lands they touched. They taught the early men the arts of language, song, and craft, and they were the keepers of law, preserving the memory of the ancient days in their songs and stories. The elves were the stewards of the natural world, nurturing the forests and caring for the creatures of the earth. Their influence could be seen in the green hills of Lindon, the golden woods of Lothlorien, and the silver shores of Mithlond. They were the builders of great cities, and the crafters of wondrous things, and their works endured long after they had passed into the West. In the end, the elves' journey through Middle-earth was one of both beauty and sorrow, and though many of the elves departed over the sea to the undying lands, their legacy endured in Middle-earth. Their songs were sung, their deeds remembered, and their influence felt in the hearts of all those who came after. They were the first to awaken in the world, the first to witness its wonders, and the first to suffer its horrors. They were the Firstborn, and so the elves remain, immortal, undying and bound to the fates of Middle-earth.